Hi, I would like to analyze with you knight fights from movies like The Last Duel or The King and find out when knight fights are realistic. I am Dequitem, an armored fighter in non-choreographed knight fights like these. A duel between knights can end quickly. In many films, the duel between the protagonist and the antagonist is the climax of the film. Just as fights in other films are becoming more realistic due to the developments in martial arts, the demands on fights between knights in modern films are also increasing. Fighting between knights should look believable and realistic for most viewers. But what makes knightly duels more realistic? The armors of the combatants is often the most popular evaluation criterion of knight duels. Fantasy inventions such as the half helmets in the film The Last Duel are often the cause of bad reviews. Even though the fights themselves may be of good quality and are realistically choreographed. Even in expensive productions, armor is usually only made of plastic or unfortunately often looks like it, and bends in places that should actually be solid. It is usually not the cost that makes costume designers resort to plastic, it's the lack of knowledge of complex forging techniques. Badly shaped armor can hardly restrict the mobility of an armored fighter. Plastic bends more easily and can therefore compensate the poor fit of a film set armor. Another big problem in films are faulty design and gaps in life-threatening places, like these loose chain collars around the neck of the actors in The King. Sharp swords can't penetrate plate armor to reach vital areas like the heart. Plate armor is impenetrable for most weapons, and not only when the plot armor allows it. One area that often forgotten in duels are the overlapping parts of armor. Low-angle attacks are often able to penetrate them and injure the body underneath. When I step directly to my plate, there is no way to go in. But when I keep a low angle, I can slip through. By contrast, penetrating chainmail is usually not as easy as some films explain. Although chainmail is the weakest point of armor, it is designed to mitigate the cutting ability and also the effectiveness of thrusts. A hit into the chainmail only means a critical injury for knights in a few cases. However, you should pay attention to whether pointy hits or thrusts penetrate armpits, the back of the knee, the inner tights, the neck area, or the side slits of the visor. Humans are fragile, but not easy to kill. Knights in armor are even harder to kill. Only a stab in the heart can kill a person instantly. But that is not so easy if you are under chest plate. And even successful stabs in such areas are intercepted or slowed down by the chainmail. Crime statistics often show that those who have been attacked with a knife often continued fighting even after 20 stab wounds or more. Knights with helmets and chest plates therefore likely to survive more hits or require more targeted and deadly hits. But it's not that easy to stab someone who's defending his so-called weak points and try to kill you as well. Many medieval combat experts claim that only stabbing or thrusts are effective in armored combat. However, this does not mean that knights should never attack with sword strikes. Strikes are not only attacks, but also parades or counter-actions. In addition, they can be very effective against unarmored areas without plate or chainmail. In the film The Last Duel, it makes perfectly sense to throw strikes in the directions of the duelist faces. Also, hits to the filigree gauntlets of the knights with little padded helmets or the chain hoods are highly effective. Yes, a strike can only kill a knight in a few cases, but they are still appropriate in duels. Let's compare a judicial knight duel to the First Blood or the high medieval tournaments with sharp swords with an MMA fight. In MMA fights you often see jabs. A jab rarely KOs opponents, and yet the jab is a popular technique used by most fighters and not considered ineffective. The situation is similar with sword strikes in knight fights. Often they cannot be ignored. They can hit you hard and break your structure, make you disoriented. They can defend you and prepare deadly thrusts. However, if you see significantly more strikes than stabs or thrusts in a duel, in which both opponents are wearing full plate armor, this is often a sign of a lack of realism. The same applies to kicks and punches. There is a joke among stunt fighters in the field of sword fighting that kicks and punches are used to increase the intensity of the fight, although the effectiveness of the fight is reduced. So if a hero in a fight is kicked around, it's a sign that he should look like he could lose, but under no circumstances should he get injured yet. So in most cases, kicks and punches are a sign of plot armor. Nevertheless, kicks and punches can be effective. Over 600 medieval fighting techniques can be found in medieval sources, such as those of Paul Hector Mayer. From this wealth of techniques, only a few selected that are in the repertoire of the choreographers are usually shown in our movies. Poking or grappling and half-swording is rarely shown in fights. Half-swording techniques are only shown in defense, but the real strength of half-swords is precision and counter-steps. Historical wrestling and grappling techniques are often completely absent. In many cases, fights end in ground combat. The exact ratio is difficult to determine. During my training, about half of fatal hits come from melee combat and grapples. Medieval sources also shown Ringen, the grappling techniques and wrestling techniques, for armored combat as the art of killing knights. So it is very important to show them in TV shows and films as well. There are over 100 different techniques ranging from complex judo throws to the use of pole arms, swords and daggers as a leverage. So far, no Hollywood film has shown a so-called judo throw in a night duel. But there are still the pointless pausing and pushing even in films today. Conversations between duelists only happen when you are at a distance or in grappling in a relaxed position. The use of swords as leverage in grappling is rarely shown, but there's a good example based on a historical instruction in the film The King. But also films like The King can be improved when it comes to the choice of weapons. Knights often not only carry swords and daggers. Many duels start with spears and poleaxes. Swords are light and agile. While one-handed swords only weigh about a kilo, even two-handed swords are usually lighter than 3 kilograms. Dodging diagonal sword slashes is difficult. Paying attention to correct distance management shows whether a fighter knows what he's doing or not. If a knight manages to dodge to the sides, it's never due to his talent, but to the lack of skill of his opponent's actor. It is only possible to avoid diagonal blows backwards. In a fight, the fastest attacks and counters are the most effective. A blade should always choose the shortest part to the target. It gets weird when long charged attacks are shown or attacks to the legs are countered with even longer defense moves downwards instead of just pulling the leg away. Charged attacks, overswings and dodges are often the most extreme sign of poor performance. For filmmakers of duels between knights, it is most important that the fights are exciting and that the character development of the protagonist progresses. The fight must not end immediately. It should not end immediately and give the hero the time to prove himself. The hero may only win the fight by a narrow margin, and it must be a difficult test against a powerful and brutal opponent. But that can also be done with historical techniques. Of course, the filmmakers still have room for improvement, but films like The Last Duel show me that Hollywood can also develop in the right directions in case of sword fighting.